welcome to another Dun & Bradstreet Awards Night. Well, these awards night pepper the corporate calendar in an ever-expanding canvas because excellence pervades all realms of the business world. And so on the back of the Dun & Bradstreet sequence of awards night, corporate, SME, banking, and equity, which incidentally unfolds in 2 days' time at the Infra Awards as well. To be sure, this isn't a recent edition. Tonight is the third edition of the Infra Awards, the legacy, however, carrying over from 5 prior editions of the associated premier publication, India's Leading Infrastructure Companies 2013. One of tonight's showpiece moments will be the ceremonious release of the 6th edition. That isn't the only piece of ceremony on the night, because the publication is inextricably linked to the felicitation ceremony we call the Dun & Bradstreet Infra Awards 2013. So ladies and gentlemen, as you would have figured, is going to be one busy night, chock-a-block, as chock-a-block can be. I am Sachin Kumbar, ordained to put it all in perspective. The slice of excellence we are honoring tonight is that related to infrastructure. That would be everything from ports, roads, railways, airports, power, water, SEZs, and lots more. Well, clearly, the building blocks of a nation's economy. In that sense, tonight is all about examining the very DNA of progress. Ladies and gentlemen, on a lighter note, the hardest thing about business is, well, minding your own. As we launch this very special evening, I must follow the truism in letter and spirit and leave the exploration of the deeper contours of this event to those with the knowledge and credentials to do so. Right at the top of the evening, that privilege must go, as always, to the President and CEO, India Dun & Bradstreet. Of course, before he steps up to deliver the welcome address, courtesy demands that I introduce and invite him with a small introduction. An MBA from Bowling Green State University, Ohio, he joined Dun & Bradstreet India back in the year 1998 and has since helped maneuver the company's fortunes in this part of the world. His previous roles have transcended geography as well, having been strategically and operationally involved with the company's chapters across Asian and African markets. I must take special mention of Smera Ratings Limited, the setting up of which he played a significant role in. On board of the SME Rating Agency of India and member of the Young President Organization, I give you President and CEO, India Dun & Bradstreet, Mr. Kaushal Sampath.
Mr. Naresh Salecha, IRAS, Joint Secretary and Financial Advisor, Ministry of Urban Development, Government of India. Mr. R.K. Birla, Managing Director, Sujna Metal Products Limited. Mr. Rohan Salian, Founder and CEO, Stepping Stones. Friends from the media, ladies and gentlemen. It is with great pleasure that I welcome you this evening to the 3rd edition of the Infra Awards, launched by Dun & Bradstreet to felicitate the leading infrastructure projects and companies in India. The awards are given across 4 key sectors: construction, ports, power, and telecom. I would also like to take this opportunity to announce the launch of the 2013 edition of our publication, India's Leading Infrastructure Companies. Over the past 6 years, this publication has been very well received in India and around the world by financial institutions, banks, infrastructure companies, research houses, and academics who are interested in the Indian infrastructure sector. It profiles leading infrastructure companies across the 4 sectors that I talked about and provides a comprehensive overview along with the future outlook and detailed insights pertaining to these sectors. It is an acknowledged fact that socio-economic progress and sustainable growth of a nation is closely linked to the development of its physical infrastructure. In recent years, India has made some progress in physical infrastructure such as electricity, roads, railways, ports, airports, irrigation, urban and rural water supply, and sanitation. However, all of us will acknowledge that a lot more needs to be done and done at a much, much quicker pace. Needless to say, infrastructure development and funding remains the topmost agenda item for the Indian government to help restore GDP growth to 9% by the end of the 12th five-year plan. The 11th five-year plan, which ran from 2007 to 2012, closed with an overall investment in infrastructure of about rupees 24.2 trillion rupees, which marks an increase in infrastructure investment from 5.6% of GDP as achieved in the 10th five-year plan to 7.2%. Considering the enhanced focus on this sector, policymakers expect infrastructure spend to be around 8.18% of GDP by the end of the 12th five-year plan. So we're going, as you see, from 5.6, we went up to 7.2 in the 11th, and by the 12th five-year plan, at the end of it, we should be at about 8.2%. In dollar terms, this would translate to nearly US dollars 1 trillion. More importantly, private sector investments in infrastructure are expected to grow by nearly 48% during the 12th five-year plan, a much higher growth rate than what was witnessed in the 11th five-year plan. So you're seeing two secular trends, growth in the spends and the growth of the private sector in infrastructure projects. During financial year 2007 to 2013, so if you look at that period, India's Infrastructure Industry Index, as released by the Office of the Economic Advisor, Ministry of Commerce and Industry, it grew at an average of 5.5%. However, in financial year 13, the overall infrastructure index slowed down and showed a growth of only 4.2% over the prior year. More worryingly, this slowdown has worsened in the first 5 months of the current fiscal, that is from April to September, when the infrastructure index grew by only 2.3%, primarily due to a decline in the production of coal and cement. Looking at the financing side, on a year-on-year basis, the growth of gross bank credit to the infrastructure sector, which had decelerated to 14% in financial year 12 from 39% in financial year 11, has thankfully picked up again, with reaching almost 28% in financial year 13. It must be stated that India's infrastructure development has not kept pace with our economic growth, because it continues to be beleaguered by some perennial problems such as regulatory challenges, financing difficulties, and some poor project management practices. According to the RBI, and these numbers are pretty staggering, according to the RBI, as on June the 1st, 2013, that is a few months ago, delays in implementation were reported in almost 277 of the 569 central sector projects, each with an estimated project cost of more than rupees 1.5 billion or rupees 1,500 crores. So you can see more than half the projects there are significant delays in implementation. If you convert this into and look at it from a cost overrun perspective, the cost overrun percentage in these projects amounts to nearly 19%. How can we afford this as a nation? The mid-year review of the 11th five-year plan observed that though the financial investment is close to meeting original projections, we have failed to meet our physical infrastructure targets. These challenges need to be overcome if we are to meet the ambitious targets of the 12th five-year plan. And in this context, the steps that are being taken to break the regulatory gridlock, such as the setting up of the Project Monitoring Group, the PMG, by the Prime Minister's office, and in addition to the Cabinet Committee on Infrastructure, these, in order to move away these hurdles, these are welcome steps and steps in the right direction. Now I'd like to take a moment to talk about the publication India's Leading Infrastructure Companies 2013. The publication features 148 companies, out of which 113 are in construction, and that includes the development of airports and seaports, real estate townships, construction and commissioning of industrial units, railways, SEZs, and social infrastructure. 20 companies are from the power sector, 4 are from ports, and 11 from telecom services. This publication also provides an overview of the Indian infrastructure sector and provides very detailed financial insights on the financial performance of 2 key sectors, that is, construction and power. So I'm going to share with you some of the highlights from these 2 sectors. So let's look at the construction sector first. We looked at 85 construction companies for which financial results were made available to us in detail. And some key findings are as follows. A highly subdued economic environment coupled with tightened liquidity conditions adversely affected the infrastructure construction sector in financial year 13. No surprises there. The aggregate total income growth of the 85 construction companies decelerated to 5% compared to the 17% growth that we saw in the previous year, that is the financial year 2012. So you're going from growth of 17% to only 5%. This, as we can all agree, is a significant deceleration. Stable domestic cement and steel prices in financial year 13 did mitigate the problem to some extent, and the growth in expenses of construction companies was only 5% as compared with 18% in financial year 12. So you're seeing that being an advantage to companies in this sector. However, a tight monetary policy and firm interest rates saw the interest expense skyrocketing by 24%. And the increase in interest expense may also be attributed to higher debt levels, which have also grown for the sector by 10% over the prior year. So I know these are a lot of numbers. You're seeing raw material costs drop, but interest cost offsetting that to completely. And as a consequence, you're seeing a significant adverse impact on the bottom line of construction companies. Net profit margins of these companies dropped from 7.2% in financial year 12 to 6% in financial year 13. That's a 120 bips drop. And the aggregate profit of after tax of these companies, so the total profit of the sector of these companies dropped by nearly 14% when you compare it with financial year 12. So all in all, a pretty tough scenario for the sector. Let's now take a look at the power sector. The report provides a comparative study on 15 companies for which financial results were available for financial year 13. 6 companies out of these were from the public sector and 9 were from the private sector, and we wanted to analyze the differences there as well. Some of the key findings of the study are sluggish economic conditions and slowdown in industrial production saw the total income of power companies decelerating to 8.7% in financial year 13 as compared to the growth of 17.7% that we saw in the prior year. So you're seeing almost half in terms of growth, income growth. Public sector companies performed better than private sector peers in terms of total income growth, registering a 9.5% growth as compared to the private sector where the growth was 7% during this period. Better supply of domestic coal due to higher production in the second half of 13 saw India's coal imports decelerating to 33.7% compared with the 49, almost 50% growth that we saw in the prior year. Raw material prices, as we know, make up almost 50% of the cost of the total power companies. But the softening in the raw material prices had a significantly positive impact, with the total expenses of the power companies declining by nearly 9% compared with the 21% growth in financial year 12. So no surprises if inflation drops, your cost of raw materials drop, this sector does better with respect to expenses. Again, interest expenses played spoilsport. They grew by a whopping 40% for the power sector in financial year 13. So it's interesting, when you've got raw materials going down, interest costs going up, it's a wash for the sector. With the offset between the raw material prices dropping and the rising interest cost, the net profit margin has actually remained flat for the power sector companies when you compare this with financial year 12. The net profit margin of public sector companies stood at 12%, whereas that of private sector companies was 8%. On the profit front, actually the power sector better off than the construction sector. The aggregate net profit of the sector actually growing by 10% in financial year 13. I'd also like to share with you the latest updates for the first few months, April to June, for which data is available for these two sectors, both construction and power. Stagnant demand, coupled with liquidity issues, it continues to haunt the construction sector. The aggregate total income of the construction sector companies remained flat in Q1 compared to the corresponding period of the prior year. But the bottom line has suffered greatly, with the net profit margin dropping to only 3.5%, with the aggregate profit after tax of these companies declining by nearly 46% when you compare them with the same quarter of the prior year. So I think we're seeing continued pain in the sector. Conditions in the power sector are not too bright either. Aggregate total income of power companies actually decelerated by nearly 2%, to nearly 2% in financial year 14 in the first quarter, as compared with 13% growth that we saw in the same quarter of the prior year. So you're seeing a deceleration of growth in total income, whereas net profit for the power sector has again remained flat for the period under comparison. So you had growth of 13% prior year, first quarter. This year you've seen that growth stumble to 2%, and at the same time net profit remaining flat. So again, not a very positive scenario. In order to go beyond the numbers, we surveyed all the companies, and the primary study, the purpose was to gauge the mood of everyone in this room and all the infrastructure industry in the current scenario. What are some of the key findings? Project delays and cost overruns emerged as the most significant challenge for nearly half the respondents. 40% of the respondents cited regulatory constraints as being the key roadblock. And I was actually surprised that I thought there'd be more companies which would say that regulatory constraints were the problem, but 40% said that regulatory constraints are the primary roadblock. Nearly half of the respondents feel that improving the quality of infrastructure is amongst the major changes that we need to do in order to boost India's appeal as a key investment hub. No surprises there. 37% of the respondents were in favor of developing new industrial corridors to support the growth of this sector. So like the DMIC, I think people are saying more industrial corridors implies that infrastructure will grow in a more rapid and planned manner. Bridging the infrastructure gap in terms of financing emerged as one of the key prerequisites for restoring the attractiveness of the sector in coming days. And how would we want to bridge the gap? 44% of the respondents cited greater participation by state governments as a crucial measure for reducing the gap in infrastructure funding. Private participation has seen a steady growth across the past 3 5-year plans. And no surprises, 36% of the respondents felt that tax incentives are the key driver for pushing private investment growth in infrastructure. Ladies and gentlemen, India's rank in the infrastructure category of the Global Competitiveness Index, which was released by the World Economic Forum, has dropped this year. As if that was possible, but it has dropped by a notch, from 84 last year to 85. So we rank 85th in this category. We cannot expect to be a credible global economic power if we are going to be non-competitive on the infrastructure front. We need to regain the lost momentum in this sector at the earliest if we wish to achieve our economic growth objectives, and equally importantly, if we wish to provide our citizens with a better quality of life that they all deserve. On that note, I would like to thank and congratulate all the infrastructure companies for their active and enthusiastic involvement in DNB's India's Leading Infrastructure Companies 2013, without which neither the publication nor the awards would have been possible. The publication is growing year after year thanks to an increased participation, and we wish you to encourage other people in the sector as well to participate in greater numbers in both the publication and the award process. Thank you all for joining us tonight, and I am sure that you will enjoy the proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sampath. And surely, faster infrastructural development is the need of the hour. Ladies and gentlemen, Dun & Bradstreet is the world's leading provider of business information, knowledge, and insight, which explains why awards nights such as these are held in highest regard by India Inc. That is much evident that from the pedigree of attendance here tonight. And however, Dun & Bradstreet emphatically acknowledges that none of this would have been possible without the support of the various event partners. I take this opportunity to train the spotlight on them. Platinum partner, Stepping Stones. Associate partner, Sujna Group. Co-partner, Everest Industries Limited. Investment partner, SMC Global Securities Limited. Strength partner, Bharti Cement. Executive education partner, Indian School of Business. And media partner, NDTV Profit. We owe them a sustained show of our appreciation. Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker is an MBA from BITS Pilani in the Sujna Group for over 25 years, a professional in the industry for over 30 years. Please welcome on the dais Mr. R.K. Birla, MD Sujna Metal Products Limited.
Mr. Salecha, Mr. Rohan, Mr. Kaushal, ladies and gentlemen. Over period, there has been gradual change in how we look at infra projects. 1995 onwards, it has changed from regulated economy to an open economy, be it roads, airports, ports, power sector, highways. What a change we have seen. Who could have imagined the quality of roads we have built up in the last few years? Public-private partnership has changed everything. Foreign technology and investment has completely changed our perception what we could achieve in the quality of the types of airports and roads and other infrastructure facilities. International funding has helped a lot in achieving all these changes we see around ourselves. Quality benchmarks have changed, and the improvement in overall quality parameters are for all of us to see. This has in turn resulted in better quality of steel requirement. Nobody remember now, but not long ago, we had CTD bars, we call cold, twisted, deformed bars, where rolling mill used to produce the steel and get it twisted. It is an old story. TMT has come in, and nobody talks of CTD bar now. The new product, TMT, is much more superior in tensile strength and other technical parameters. We have gone further, added epoxy-coated steel, earthquake-resistant steel, corrosion-resistant steel, and the latest edition is ready-to-use steel, wherein drawings are provided by the person who wants the steel, and the manufacturer gives ready, cut, and bend steel. It is like the ready-mix cement, which is the prevalent now. No cutting and bending at the site, zero, that means zero wastage, no threat of pilferage. You get material ready to use when you want. That means no inventory carrying costs. Sujna is one of the pioneers in supplying ready-to-use steel under the brand Smart Steel. The concept took some time to get acceptance, but now it has picked up. And it is not too far when I think 70–80% of the steel used in the country will be Smart Steel. We at Sujna is one-stop shop for total long steel product range, from angles to beams to channels to squares to rounds. You name it and we have it as far as long steel products are concerned. I think the range we have is more than SAIL or Tata. Regarding quality, we are approved by most of the infrastructure companies and real estate builders, since we are very particular about the quality parameters. Things are changing, times are changing, and so will we to keep us a little ahead of the others. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Birla. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Stepping Stone is tonight's platinum partner. In a short time, the brand has become a market leader in natural stones that find application in flooring, amongst other things. Much of the credit for this meteoric rise in equity must go to the founder and CEO, who's displayed admirable vision, enterprise, and zest in helping the company attain its lofty goals. Under its mentorship, Stepping Stone has bagged and executed several prestigious projects across the country. A first-generation entrepreneur who's battled several hurdles and challenges to get to where he is today. He delights in helping others who similarly dream of success stories. Maybe he has a few of those to regale us, so with over the next few minutes, I give you founder and CEO, Stepping Stones, Mr. Rohan Salian.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, honorable chief guests, respected jury. I'm Rohan Salian, and I would like to welcome you all for sparing your time for this event. We have started this company about 10 years ago and have come to realize the potential that is available in the future. We at Stepping Stones have I'm a little nervous, so just bear with me. This is my first time on stage. So we'll do this again. We founded this company about 10 years ago, and we have completed major projects in Bangalore, around the world, in India. Right now, working on the Bangalore metros, we have completed 6 metro stations, and the market has picked up for us in the real estate segment for our different business models that we have to offer. We at Stepping Stones are driven with passion and creativity, and we hope with your support, we tend to grow the same way we have in the years to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Salian. Well, friends, it is the presence of special guests that add extra sheen to big nights like this. Tonight's glowing luster comes from an accomplished bureaucrat who over the decades has made significant contributions to government ministries and premier public institutions. An IRAS from the 1984 cadre, his core competencies cover the spectrum from administration, policy, and international negotiations to finance, projects, and commercial transportation. He has been a part of several intergovernmental bilateral teams as well as pivotal WTO negotiations, a career that has been characterized by weighty portfolios with the Ministry of Railways and Directorate of Shipping. He has additionally been the government-appointed director on the board of the country's most prestigious metro rail projects, besides being nominated to boards and governing councils of major public sector organizations. Ladies and gentlemen, I haven't even begun to extol the life and times of this distinguished personality, devoid of the luxury of the time that merits. Let me just invite him to deliver the keynote address. I give you Joint Secretary and Financial Advisor, Ministry of Urban Development, Government of India, Mr. Naresh Salecha, IRAS.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Rohan, Mr. Bidla, Mr. Kaushal, I'm honored to be here among the distinguished gathering. Let me begin by thanking Dun & Bradstreet for inviting me to this prestigious event as a special guest. The Dun & Bradstreet Infra Award is a welcome gesture towards recognizing the leading infrastructure companies and projects. I welcome all the companies nominated for the awards and their contribution in infrastructure development. I wish to share some of my understanding regarding the infrastructure, which has assumed importance of global proposition impacting both developed and developing world. The importance of infrastructure for sustained development is well recognized. High transaction costs arising from inadequate and insufficient infrastructure can prevent the economy from realizing its full potential regardless of progress on other fronts. physical infrastructure covering transportation, power, communication through its backward and forward linkages, facilitating growth, social infrastructure, including water supply, sanitation, sewerage, disposal, education, and health, which are in nature of primary services and has a direct impact on the quality of life. The performance of infrastructure is largely reflection of the performance of economy. Infrastructure industries are measured by key infrastructure and core industries like electricity, crude oil, petroleum refining products, coal, steel, cement, and so on. A main feature of these infrastructure projects is like that, unlike tradable commodities, which is in short supply in some time, which import can meet the gap between demand and supply, deficiencies in infrastructure cannot be made good through imports. Infrastructure requirements can only be met through development of the relevant domestic infrastructure capacity. Infrastructure is a precondition for any transition to rapid and inclusive growth. The railways, energy, transport, communication, airports, ports, water supply and sanitation, oil and natural gas, irrigation, industrial plants, industrial parks, or SEZ have traditionally been focus of attention in discussion on infrastructure. The importance of adequate infrastructure need not to emphasize, as it is obvious to everyone that it is necessary condition for growth and inclusive development. Moreover, the growing international integration of economy is putting heavy demands on infrastructure to come up to acceptable standards if we want to remain globally competitive. The government is aware of this issue and is doing its best to boost the level of infrastructure, both physical and social, in the country. The total investment requirement for infrastructure in sectors of 12 plan period estimated to over 51 lakh crore rupee, or around 1 trillion, or nearly half of which is expected to come from private sector. The government is seriously deliberating on ways and means to give incentive for more investment funds into infrastructure. Indian government has taken a number of steps to encourage private investment in infrastructure through public-private partnerships. India in recent years has emerged as one of the leading PPP market in the world because of several policy and institutional initiatives taken by the government. The viability gap funding has further been strengthened by adding many new sectors like modern storage, education, health, irrigation, etc. A large number of projects in highways, ports, airports, urban development, railways and other sectors have been undertaken through PPP. Also the concept of 4P, that is people, public, private partnership, which systematically put local citizens into the partnership framework must be applied. We have massive infrastructure projects underway. For example, Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor, entailing over $90 billion in investment. This project will have 9 mega industrial zones of about 200 to 250 square kilometers each, high-speed freight lines, 3 ports, a 6-line intersection-free expressway connecting countries' political and financial capitals, and 4,000 megawatt power plant, and provide a plug-and-play environment for manufacturing investments. By grace and blessing of Lord Ganesha, Mumbai has been pioneer in infrastructure development of the country. The city has been benefited by business and industry visionaries like Tata's, Birla's, L&T, Reliance, and so on, many others, in infrastructure and transforming the Mumbai as a financial capital of the country. However said, where there is no vision, the people will perish. Would not have seen the city called Mumbai, where dreams are born and realized every minute, where scopes are multiplying and so its ventures. Be it famous celebrities or nation's premier financial institutions, be it culture of yesteryears or the cosmopolitan way of life, Mumbai compasses everything unique and successful. Good quality infrastructure is important not only for faster growth, but also to ensure growth is inclusive. Small business spread throughout the country need access to good quality and reliable infrastructure services to compete effectively. Large enterprises can and often develop their own infrastructure, as they often do with the captive power, and being large even can locate themselves where other infrastructure is better, say nearer ports and near transport hubs. Small enterprises, on the other hand, are dispersed across country and have to rely on the general infrastructure available, Their ability to compete successfully, which is critical for growth of employment generations and inclusive, depends upon the quality of this infrastructure. We should aim at developing rural as well as urban infrastructure and provide basic services with the objective of enhancing business environment, inclusiveness, and reducing poverty. I would like to mention that infrastructure projects are perceived as highly vulnerable to risk, which constrains financing. Some of the notable risks which need to be reckoned are risks arising during the period of construction, leading to time and cost overrun, operational risk, market risk, interest rate risk, foreign exchange risk, payment risk, regulatory risks. At time, in the presence of proper risk mitigation mechanism, the cost of the project tend to increase, and such high level of risk cannot be traded off against high returns. Implementation in infrastructure development involving large projects is held up for a variety of reasons. Lack of coordinated across different agencies to facilitate the progress in project implementation can lead to long delay and cost overruns. The aim of the policy maker is to reduce the perceived risk by introducing greater policy clarity and at the same time providing an environment that will reassure investors. Any discussions on infrastructure may remain incomplete without a specific reference to the importance of urban infrastructure. In the year ahead, as the share of urban population increases and cities become the natural focus of most of the non-agriculture growth, urban infrastructure development must be added to the priorities. This is especially so because growing international integration of economy will put heavy demands on urban infrastructure to come up to acceptable standard. It has been said that 19th century was the century of empires, 20th century was century of countries, and 21st century is the century of cities. India's urban population has grown over last 3-4 decades with 109 million in 1971 to 377 million in 2011 and is expected to grow at almost 600 million by 2030. As per census 2011, 31% of India's population is urban as compared to China 45%, Indonesia 54%, Brazil 87%. India has been a reluctant urbanizer, but it has now realized the cities are the engine of growth and they need to be nurtured and adequately provided for. 60% of GDP come from the urban areas. Its top 100 cities house 16% of population and contribute 43% of country's GDP. While rapid urbanization and growing cities provide various opportunities, there is fallout in terms of proliferation of slums, congestions, shortage of potable drinking water, inadequate solid waste management, insufficient urban connectivity like roads, transport, high price of land and building material, which has rendered houses unaffordable for the segment at the bottom of the pyramid, that is the economic weaker sections. There is urgent need to improve the critical infrastructure and services and housing need for EWS in the towns and cities. The investment for urban infrastructure, that is water supply, solid water waste management, sewerage, urban transport over a 20-year period of 2012 to 2031 is estimated to 39.2 lakh crore at 2009 and 2010 prices, as per High Power Committee set up by Planning Commission. This obviously cannot be met by public sector alone. To address the urgent need of investment in urban sector, to meet the issues emanating from rapid urbanization, the government has in India launched a program called JNNURM during December 2005 and started serious thinking for investment on urban infrastructure and housing by central government and by state governments. JNNURM, as you are aware, is a reform-linked program leading to creation of urban infrastructure in general and housing for economic weaker sections and urban population. JNNURM has led a paradigm shift in the urban space across India. JNNURM has 4 components. One is UIG, that is Urban Infrastructure and Governance, UID SSMT, Urban Infrastructure in Small and Medium Cities, and ISDUP, that is Integrated Housing and Urban Slum Development Program, and Basic Services for Urban Poor. Ministry of Urban Development is responsible for implementing the urban infrastructure and governance, which fund projects in water supply, sanitation, solid waste management, urban renewal, urban road transportation. Government has allocated 31,500 crore for the phase 1 of UIG component as central share. As on August 2013, total number of 566 projects and total cost of 62,603 and central share of 28,986 crore has been sanctioned under the scheme. The Government of India has already released 21,000 crore. The central allocation for phase 2 of JNNURM during 12 plan is envisaged as 65,000 crore rupee. The technical committee constituted Ministry of Housing has estimated housing shortage of 18.78 million during 12 5-year plan, over which 95% of this housing shortage is estimated to be for EWS category. In pursuance to this vision of slum-free India, the Government of India has launched a new scheme called RAY, Rajiv Awas Yojana, which was launched very recently in 2011-12. Central government has approved the implementation phase for period 2013 to 2022. RAY, which is Rajiv Awas Yojana, envisages a slum-free India with inclusive and equitable cities in which every citizen has access to basic services, infrastructure, social amenities, decent shelter. The RAY also includes the scheme for affordable housing in partnership which aim to encourage private sector participation. In creation of affordable housing, stock recognizing that mere effort at government sector cannot be sufficient to address the housing shortage. RAY will cover all existing slums, notified and non-notified, with the formal system, enabling them to avail the basic amenities. Total allocation for RAY in 12 plan is 35,810 crore rupee. However, there is no denying the fact that journey of planned urbanization has only been initiated very recently, and we have 2 miles to go before we achieve the objective of planned urbanization. I am happy to note that Dun & Bradstreet is releasing 6th publication titled India's Leading Infrastructure Company 2013, which Kaushal just mentioned. Such publication is extremely useful in spreading the knowledge and information on the issue of infrastructure within and outside the country, throw up the ideas and suggestions in addressing the issues confronting the infrastructure development in India. I am sure exciting times are ahead of us for infrastructure development in our country as we enter and we are passing through the 12th 5-year plan, which promise to be open more avenues for innovative planning, projects, policies, products, and partnerships. I congratulate the awardees for their achievement and effective project design and implementation. I also thank all others who missed the award, though their performance and quality is equally excellent. Each and every nominee deserves an award as they have rendered great service to the society and country. And I would like to thank all of you for your kind and patient listening to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Salecha, for all those details. Well, I began the evening telling you about the publication around which this entire event pivots, because it is the ranking within that publication that determines the roll call for the soon-to-unfold awards ceremony. But more than that, this thoroughly researched and painstakingly put together storehouse of information will serve, as its 5 predecessors did, as the pivotal point of reference for business, clients, government, and anyone even remotely connected with infrastructure and the economy. So what's inside the publication? In addition to highlighting key sectors such as construction, ports, power, telecommunication, and the like, and profiling each sector's biggest performers, the publication also provides a grand industry overview and examines various infrastructure-related developments, as well as some of the prominent issues faced by various sectors. Now, we edge ever so closer to that moment when the 6th edition of India's Leading Infrastructure Companies 2013 will be officially released. In fact, the moment is already here. To do the honors, please welcome tonight's special guest, Mr. Naresh Salecha, and I request Mr. Kaushal Sampath to assist with the release and all other dignitaries to remain on stage through the length of this short ceremony. Ladies and gentlemen, surely a round of applause as we witness the launch of the 6th edition of India's Leading Infrastructure Companies 2013. 6 editions strong, and the in-session reading tag is now literally irrevocable. But first, let me express our collective gratitude to Mr. Salecha for that official release and all the other dignitaries. And may I request Mr. Sampath to escort all the dignitaries to the reserve tables closest to the dais. Thank you so much once again. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the publication, I'm sure, will eventually find its way to your mantelpieces and bookshelves, as it will to those of corporations of every hue, government departments and agencies, and libraries of academic institutions as well. In the event of non-receipt of the conventional print format, there's always the online version. You'll be doing your bit for the environment too by doing this. For now, though it's the spotlight version rolling out, you guessed that right, the honors ceremony of the Dun & Bradstreet Infra Awards 2013. As we literally set the stage for the ceremony, as you see, it's probably the perfect moment to get you in the process that helped determine tonight's winners. The base universe was compiled from various sources such as Dun & Bradstreet's internal database, India's premier stock exchanges, industry bodies and associations, leveraging data that came through the widely circulated nomination forms as well as authentic information available in the public domain. Certain parameters and numbers next came into play. For the company awards, a minimum income of 100 crore rupees during fiscal year 2012 and 13 was the base requirement. The project awards considered a 5-year completion window with certain size stipulations as well. While the former was determined purely through a proprietary model, the latter endured a process of shortlisting and finally scrutiny by an eminent panel of independent judges. Here, I'd like to mention that the eminent member of the jury were Mr. Naresh Salecha, IRAS, Joint Secretary and Financial Advisor, Ministry of Urban Development, Government of India, Mr. Amitabh Kant, IAS, CEO and MD, Delhi Mumbai Industrial Corridor Development Corporation Limited, and Professor Ashok Gupta, Dean Infrastructure, Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi. Dun & Bradstreet would like to thank all the 3 jury members for their support and time. Also, the challenging global environment has driven many businesses to become largely responsive to risk. While risk management is an integral function of any enterprise, what's more relevant today is preparedness and quick reaction times. Awareness of global financial trends and their implications would give risk managers the necessary foresight to stay ahead in the race. The Center for Executive Education at ISB presents a course on enterprise risk management starting on the 25th of November 2013. Well, this 2-day program aims to provide an in-depth understanding of trends, scenarios, and processes that will help your managers plan, monitor, control, and lead the most crucial business functions in your organizations. The details of this course are given in the brochure in your welcome kit.